Hi, welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your moderator for today's show. In today's show, we're going to be discussing the war and the debt. And the war is something quite interesting. If you ever saw an old movie or TV show, Laurel and Hardy, fine mess you got us into now, Ollie. Well, it looks like that's where we're at right now. And so I don't know where we're going from here. So we need to look into the future and find out where we're going and talk to somebody who knows a little bit more about the national debt, economics, and the war. And this is the former Comptroller General of the United States, the Honorable David M. Walker, and maybe you can shed some light on our current financial position, this war, this debt. I saw one rumor, I don't know if it's true, that the national debt's now 39 trillion. So that doesn't sound very good, especially in a time of war. So David, where are we at and where are we going with this thing?
Well, let's start with the financial situation, and then we can pivot into the Iran conflict. Obviously, there are economic and financial implications associated with that. I am now doing a series of articles for Fortune magazine. The editor of Fortune contacted one of my board members, Steve Hanke, who's one of the top 20 economists in the world. He's a professor at Johns Hopkins, worked in the Reagan White House on the economic team years ago, back in the 80s. It turns out that Steve is also a regular contributor to Fortune. And so the editor talked to Steve and asked whether or not he would be willing to work with me to do a series of articles on or op-eds on U.S. financial issues. And so we've already published two. The first one was last week that talked about crossing the $39 trillion mark, which I'll come back to. The second one was also last week, which was reflected on the publication of the financial statements of the U.S. government for the year ended September 30, 2025, which I'll come back to. And the third one will be published today, it's my understanding, which elaborates on why we need a constitutional amendment and how do you get a constitutional amendment other than through the Congress, because the Congress last week tried to pass a Swiss debt brake type balanced budget amendment, and it failed in the House. It got 211 positive votes, 207 negative votes. You might say, well, it sounds like it should pass. But no, for a constitutional amendment, you have to get 2/3 vote, which is 291. So they were well short of that. And it's very, very clear that given the current situation in Congress and the very close margins, there's no way that Congress is going to be able to pass a proposed fiscal responsibility amendment, 2/3 margin in the House, 2/3 margin in the Senate. And therefore, we need to go to Plan B. And Plan B is we need to let the states do it. And we need to let the people ratify it. And that's what that op-ed is about. Now, on some of the numbers, everybody talks about 39 trillion, but when the financials came out, the second op-ed talked about that's not the right number because the 39 trillion doesn't include a range of other liabilities, things like unfunded civilian and military pensions, retiree health care, a number of other traditional liabilities. In addition to that, the 39 trillion doesn't include the huge amount of unfunded social insurance obligations for Social Security, Medicare, et cetera. That's $88 trillion. And that, in fact, during the fiscal year ended September 30, 2025, our whole, meaning the total liabilities and unfunded obligations, went up $12.6 trillion in 1 year. 2.5 of that was from ongoing government operations, and 10.1 of it was associated with Social Security and Medicare. A vast majority of it was Medicare. I think about 2.5 was Social Security, and the rest of it was Medicare. And so the bottom line is that our situation is poor and deteriorating. The second op-ed that was published talked about the fact that the editor for the publication picked the headline. The authors don't pick the headline. The editor for the publication picked the headline and said, the Treasury Department just announced that America is insolvent. Well, a couple of problems with that. Number one, it's not America. It's the federal government. Okay. Secondly, we got a little bit of pushback from some of the people who read the article, which, by the way, went viral domestically and internationally. We got a little bit of pushback saying, well, the federal government's not insolvent because it can borrow. And look, my comeback to that was read the definition. There's two definitions of the word insolvent, which Fortune agrees with. The first definition is you can't pay your bills when they're due, and we can do that. But how do we do it? We either borrow more money or we expand the money supply, or both. And those obviously don't solve the problem, okay? They make the problem worse. Secondly, the second definition is your liabilities exceed your assets. Well, ours do by about $41.1 trillion. Now, we've got $6.1 trillion in assets, and obviously a lot higher than that in liabilities when you get a 41.1 net negative position. Now, in fairness, the power to tax is not included in there. In fairness, the value of the real estate that the United States owns, about 20% of the land, is not in there because we have no intention to sell it. The value of national historic sites, including the one behind me, the White House, is not included in there because we have no intention to sell it. Okay. But the bottom line is that we're in poor and deteriorating financial condition. We're starting to have more problems with bond auctions. Rates the rates that we're having to pay have creeped up, and so we'll see what happens. Pivoting now to the Iran conflict, and I use the word conflict intentionally because the last time the United States declared war was World War II. And we've had more than a few conflicts since World War II, where we ended up, having a lot of human casualties and a lot of financial losses. In the current situation, it's more complicated than people realize. First, we have certain military objectives, and our military objectives are being accomplished, and they're being accomplished in a very timely manner. Namely, to destroy the Navy, to destroy the Air Force, and to significantly degrade their capabilities with regard to, to destroy as many as we can of the missiles and drones, and to destroy their capability to continue to manufacture missiles and drones. Obviously, we're concerned about the stockpile of enriched uranium that they have. We've already hit their centrifuges, and so we've taken care of that, but they've got a significant amount of enriched uranium, and the Israelis ended up taking out a lot of the leadership, both civilian and military and clerical leadership. But the problem that you have right now is the Strait of Hormuz. About 20% of the world's daily oil production moves through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, it's not something that we need. We don't need the oil from the Strait of Hormuz. And by the way, of that 20%, most of it is not Iranian oil. It's other oil producers. But the Iranians have basically, dramatically halted movement of crude oil and natural gas through the Strait of Hormuz. Insurance companies, Lloyd's of London won't insure vessels going through there. A few days ago, they let 10 tankers go through. Today, they're supposed to let 20 through. But the bottom line is that we need to open up freedom of navigation. And the ultimate irony is the people who need it are not us. We don't need it, okay? China needs it. India needs it. Thailand needs it. Pakistan needs it. And some European countries need it, but not the UK, obviously, which has access to North see oil. One of the frustrating aspects here is the winner here is Russia. Russia ends up being able to sell its oil at a lot higher price. In addition, the United States has given temporary relief with regard to India being able to purchase Russian oil because of the conflict. India obviously relies upon the Middle East for a lot of their energy. Japan does too. Okay, another. And so what the U.S. is trying to do, they're trying to get the nations who actually need the oil from the Middle East to start contributing more support with regard to military capabilities, et cetera, to ensure safety of navigation. We've now deployed Marine forces, amphibious forces into the region. We've got more coming. The 82nd Airborne has been partially mobilized and moved to the region. And so the real question is, what, if anything, is going to happen from here if negotiations are not successful between the United States and the Iranian government? Trying to figure out who the heck the Iranian government is a challenge in and of itself. My gut feeling is I hope that we can avoid having to use ground troops. I don't believe that we'll use ground troops in mainland Iran for lots of reasons. I think there's a possibility that a decision might be made to take Karg Island, which is about 90% of Iran's energy, and to try to be able to squeeze Iran from an economic standpoint. A lot of people don't understand that the Strait of Hormuz, while it needs international passage, the Strait of Hormuz, about half of it is Iranian territory, and about half of it is Omanian territory. All right. The problem is if you say, well, gee, let's just go through the Omanian territory, forget about the Iranian territory. Unfortunately, the Iranians will use drones and missiles and fast attack watercraft, no matter whose territory it is. And so we need to get this thing resolved soon. Wrapping it up, Trump needs to learn from past presidents, in particular George Herbert Walker Bush. George Herbert Walker Bush had an over 90% favorability rating after the first Gulf War, which was a coalition effort and a tremendous success. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, we pushed him out, we punished them, but we didn't try to invade Iraq or change the government or build democracy in the country at that time. But George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, went from a 90+% favorability rating to losing re-election. And why? Because most American people don't care that much about foreign policy, and they don't like war. They care about economics and their pocketbook. While Trump doesn't is not standing for election in November of 2026, all of the House is and a third of the Senate is, and they will be punished if this thing is not wrapped up in a reasonably timely manner. Because the problem is not the military issue, the problem is the economic issue. And I'll leave it at that. And hopefully that gave enough fuel for people to be able to comment on, and we can have a little debate.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of people here, so we'll bring in, we have Jacoby here, Sasha Starr has arrived, Dr. Sharif from Bangladesh, and Mark Lee from Durham. Yes, David.
And Nick, can I say one more thing real quick? The other thing that's going on right now, which is fiscal related, is the funding of the Department of Homeland Security. Mm-hmm. I'll lay out right now my thinking. I think, and I'm an independent, so understand that, okay? And I think both parties have big problems, okay? And I'm not a Trumpster. I'm not a MAGA guy, all right? But I think the bottom line is it's outrageous that we haven't funded the Department of Homeland Security. It's doubly outrageous that the Senate and the House are on a 2-week recess when, in fact, they haven't done that. My personal view is that the Democrats, have largely been to blame for this, with one exception, and that is I don't understand why the Republicans in the House didn't take the Senate compromise proposal. They evidently didn't listen to Ronald Reagan, where Ronald Reagan said, if I can get 75 to 80% of what I want, I'll take it. And I'll live to fight for the other 20 to 25% later. And that's exactly what I think that Senate bill was. It was at least 75 to 80%. And the idea that we're not funding DHS and asking people to work without pay, the area that has to do with Homeland Security, while these people are on, quote, they say they're on, that they're doing town hall meetings. That's a bunch of bull. They're not doing town hall meetings because they have such a low rating. Is a high risk doing a town hall meeting because people give them hell, and they rightfully should give them hell. I mean, the Congress is divided and dysfunctional as I have ever seen.
And they're taking a 2-week break.
They're taking a 2-week. Believe me, there'll be plenty of Codels. They'll be going overseas doing a lot of Codels. Again, who's that paid for by? The taxpayer.
All right.
Yeah,
so
that's outrageous. We'll see, Rick.
You largely blame the Democrats for this, but don't you think that voters who don't pay much attention, which is more than half of the population, kind of blame Republicans because they're not really seeing individual, they just see a whole mess.
Well, let me comment on that, Rick. Okay. Unfortunately, Americans, a vast majority of Americans didn't have to take civics before they graduated from high school. And as a result, they don't understand how the system works. By that, I mean, yes, the Republicans control the Senate, the House, and the White House. Okay. And in the House, it's a simple majority vote. The minority doesn't have any rights. You can do a cram down if you can keep all your people together. Okay. In the Senate, it's not that way. There's something called the filibuster. Okay. And therefore, you have to have 60 votes in order to be able to bring a bill to the floor, unless it's budget reconciliation. Okay. And as a result, while, a vast majority of the Republicans have voted yes, only one Democrat has voted yes, and therefore it can't go to a vote. All right. And yes, the president is a Republican, but people don't understand the rules. They don't understand how it works. As I said, both are to blame to differing degrees, but we need to get this resolved sooner rather than later.
Yeah, Jatovi's up here.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, you muted.
There we go. Just got back to the house, but just a couple of things to touch base on. One, yes, I think people do understand the way the government works. However, I think people also understand that because the Republican Party has the House, the Senate, the presidency, SCOTUS, most of the federal judges, so on and so forth. Right now, the Republican Party is in charge of most of the country, even governor-wise. So the Republican Party is in charge, and under the Republican Party being in charge, we've had the longest shutdowns in our history. We've had the most government employees getting unpaid. We've had the highest, the most money spent is up under Republican presidencies and everything else. However, the economy seems to run better, and we're better governed under at least a split instead of at one party ruling everything. But right now, I think, yes, people do blame the Republican Party just because they are in power and they are supposed to come to the negotiating table, even with the Senate. And even when the Senate passed their bill, because ICE is funded already. They don't need any extra money. So that is taken off the table. That got pushed in the Senate bill. And the Senate actually, bipartisan, signed it, went back to the Republican House, and the Republicans said, no, we're going to do our way or it's the highway. So that is where the blame comes into play, where it falls on the Republican Party. And then you have Donald Trump also saying, hey, I'm not going to sign anything unless the SAVE Act is passed, and we're not going to do anything unless it's my way or the highway. So then it leans more Republican, catching the blame that way because that's the way it sounds and that's the way it feels and looks. So to the average individual, that's why the Republican Party gets it. In terms of the Iran situation, we had discussed this before. I mean, you're sending the paratroopers now over there, or the 82nd Airborne over there. They're not just going to camp out and they're not just hanging out. So we're on the precipice of boots being put on the ground. We're now there. And we already know that Iran has booby-trapped Karth Island. So that's a suicide mission. We also know that going after the uranium that's under a pile of rubble, that's another suicide mission. So right now we have to figure out some other negotiation way because Trump has burned every bridge possible. So we've got to figure out and bring in a third or fourth party because we've gone in at it alone. Well, we've gone in it at the behest of Israel because Netanyahu wanted this war for a while, but we are now following, and that's what the world sees. It's not just me saying it. That's what the world sees. So we have to figure out some way out of this. And sadly enough, we'll probably hit $5 a gallon gas because this is not going to open up for a while. Because actually, even they were talking about the path through Oman is now the next target to be blocked. So now you have the Strait and Oman being blocked. So now you have nothing coming through. So we're at a bad point.
A little bit coming through, but not nearly enough. And
let's see Sharif and listen to the where all the population is over in Asia.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the show. This is very interesting shows, and we learn a lot from this show. Thank you, Honorable David Walker. We are organizing a very high quality conference coming December. We want to invite you all in Bangladesh. But one thing I want to touch in this conflict, this Iran and this US conflict, if you see the overall scenario, the most important factor for me, roughly 2,000 to 3,000 people killed. And I get these sources from different informations, mainly civilians, over 1,000 people, also military personnel also killed. Even in USA, it looked like around 13 to 15 US soldiers killed, 300 injured. Yes, maybe there are a lot of economical values and these other things, but most important factor is human lives. How USA can protect as a leader. Definitely, USA is a global leader. They have world big militaries. They have world largest economy. They have world largest research center. They have all of the big things in their control. But also they have the responsibility to save human lives, including their own people. What's your thought, Honorable David Walker, regarding this killing around 3,000 people in this conflict? It's not only Iran, also in Israel, US people, UAE, Saudi Arab, everywhere people are dying. Even Bangladeshi, 5 people, they died in this conflict. What's your thoughts about this? How you want to measure human lives?
Well, several things. The United States does not target civilians. It takes great pains to try to make.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. First day, Iran attack in a school. They killed many guards in the school. American people killed Iranian schools. Young women. Yeah.
The United States does not intentionally target civilians. Okay. There's an investigation going on with regard to that school. It's been alleged that it was United States munitions that were used. If that's true, it's tragic and there needs to be accountability. Okay. But what I will tell you is that we don't intentionally target civilian areas. Okay. But at the same point in time, what I will tell you is Iran does intentionally target civilian areas. Okay. And yes, the United States has lost 13 to 15 people. We also have a number of people that have been injured as well. People in Israel have died. There's some in other countries. You say 5 from Bangladesh. I mean, They must have been in the region because obviously they're not attacking Bangladesh. Okay. And I would imagine the casualties are probably the highest in Iran. Okay. Look, any death is tragic, especially if it's civilians. But in war, war is hell, and bad things happen in war. I just hope that we can wrap this thing up sooner rather than later. Part of the big problem, quite frankly, you've got a regime that is fanatical. You've got a regime that does not respect human life. You have a regime that has killed at least 40,000 of their citizens who protested against them. Okay. And you've got a country where even if 90% plus of the people in the country want a different government, they're unarmed. And they're unarmed to go against a regime that is heavily armed, that does not value human life. And so one of the things that I think is going to happen is you can't do regime change with missile and air attacks. I mean, that just doesn't work, okay? We're going to have to figure out either some type of settlement, or we're going to have to figure out some type of way where the Iranian people can get armed, and then they can take up the issue on their own. But with our support with regard to weapons, and with our support with regard to intelligence, and with our support with regard to air activities, if you will. But you can't get regime change with air power and missile power. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, Honorable David Walker, this is very interesting discussions, and you bring very valuable point in terms of 80% Iranian do not support regime. Honestly speaking, how I see this Middle East right now, it's not genuine informations. If the regime, the mass people of Iran, they do not support this present regime, why don't they come to the road? Why don't they go against with all of the Iranian politics and everything? Reality is that this is the very much concern how we understand US intelligence, US military, definitely Israel protections, Iron Dome, and all of the big propaganda. Honestly speaking, it's look like it's not genuine.
Well, I can tell you,
USA, Honorable David Walker, USA do not have enough information about Iranian missile, Iranian strain, Iranian capacity. You also mentioned about USA do not have long-term plan and other things. It's look like it's unplanned war. And for that particular issues, even in Bangladesh, I'm suffering. We do not have wealth. We do not have energies. Many people are losing their jobs. Many factories are closing. Hospitals and schools and everything is closing. The government has to change the plan and everything. It's look like everyone in the trouble because of this war.
Well, first, I would respectfully suggest that the Israelis probably have better intelligence than we do with regard to Iran, okay? Secondly, I would respectfully suggest that the reason you don't see millions of people out on the street protesting against the current government is because the current government will kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that seems to be a minor problem. We'll listen to Canada. We'll have Sasha Starr from Canada and see what the thoughts are from our friends on the other side of the border.
Yeah, I'd like to mention that David just mentioned that Iranians would have to be armed, that 80% hate the present regime. Not sure about this 80%, where is it coming from? Now, about Iranians are being armed, yes, it's happening right now. They have 1 million people armed to fight, and they're now supplying arms to 12 years old kids to fight for the regime. The killing of 86 years old Ayatollah was the gravest mistake by both Israel and United States, simply because it was a figure that indeed most of Iranians really hated, and it would be very easily to unite Iranians to fight the regime of this 86 years old Ayatollah was at the head. Now, once you eliminated that figure, there is no more a single point of uniting Iranians against government. It's gone. Now they are uniting behind flag. And guess what? It's Iranian flag. Now they can see the foreigners are destroying the school, killing people left and right, and put the country into ruin. So they have now, only now, they have a real epicenter to unite for and fight for. Now, let's see a month's gone since the war started. So we can put some kind of a short conclusion. What's happened in a month? So, okay, so the Ayatollah and his 40 or so advisors were killed. For each killed Ayatollah, they have 5,000 other Ayatollahs ready to take his place and function, and maybe even much worse than the original Ayatollah. As the destroying their production facilities for arms and so on. So there are many more facilities that are functioning, and many more facilities will be built or rebuilt and so on. So that's nothing. And what else is achievement? Oh, achievement now will be to free and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But before the war, the Strait of Hormuz were open, and everybody could use it. So what is exactly achievement of both Israelis and Americans in that war a month since it started? What exactly is that? There is no way that expedition force of 10, 20, 50,000 Americans can take over the country. Such a difficult geography as Iran with 92, 93 million people and million army. Take my guess. It's not going to happen.
Oh, several things. Okay, number one, Israel took out the Ayatollah and the leadership. The United
Wonderful.
States. Okay,
Great.
I'm just getting the facts. Okay. Secondly, as I said before, if it turns out that the United States, it wouldn't have been intentional, but if it turns out United States weapons resulted in the destruction of that school and the killing of those people, then people need to be held accountable. And potentially there should be some compensation for those, okay? Not to the government, to the people, all right? Thirdly, I have no idea, nor does anybody on this call, nor does probably anybody in the world really know what percentage of the Iranian population either does or doesn't support the regime. Part of the problem is we don't even know who's in charge. I mean, we don't know who's in charge, okay? It's not clear.
So where is the 80% coming from, David? Explain to me.
It's come from Rick Rosner, who gave me the statistics.
Which is coming from, I just asked AI. Does AI know what it's talking about?
Rick,
I have one thing.
If you go to ChatGPT,
it's not a comedy show.
If you go to ChatGPT,
no, I went to
ChatGPT also
Google
advised.
I go right to Google. Is that good? I don't know.
Okay, I think Jacoby has some
Hold on. Next thing.
Wait, okay.
I think it would be a huge mistake to try to put boots on the ground in mainland Iran. Okay.
Yeah, correct.
A huge mistake. Okay, for lots of different reasons. That doesn't mean there couldn't be some special forces targeted things that might happen. But as far as trying to quote unquote invade Iran, that would be insanity.
David,
okay,
yes, U.S. has capacity to take over Iranian government, and do whatever needs to be done. U.S. does not want to pay the price.
Right.
Killed American soldiers. It doesn't want to pay the price, and if you don't pay the price, you cannot get the goods. There are goods, you can take the goods, but you have to pay. No, America doesn't want to pay, they won't take. Not going to happen.
Sasha, as you may recall, there are some in the U.S. government that asserted that we would end up making money when we invaded Iraq the second time, because they assumed that we would assume control of all of their oil, which is stupid. There's no way. It's not our oil. It's the Iraqi people's oil, right? And it cost thousands of lives and trillions of dollars. I don't think we'll make that mistake again.
Then how you will solve all your problems? The war started a month ago and nothing was solved. Only problems created. The Strait of Hormuz, which was open a month ago before the war, now it's closed and it will require hundreds of American lives to reopen it. What kind of business is that?
I think they definitely underestimated the impact on the strait. No question about it. Okay. Next.
Okay,
So very
just
important. Excuse me, your government is incompetent because Iranians were saying exactly what they're going to do, that they will bomb these American bases and they will bomb this the Middle East assets, and they will close the Strait of Hormuz. It was right in the open. So people who heard that but thought that, well, maybe they're playing games. Maybe they will not open the Strait of Hormuz. They are incompetent. They have to be fired and found guilty
I will say this. There has been a total lack of accountability in connection with failures in a number of regards, including this, and there needs to be. Next.
yeah, to Toby.
So, I guess I hate to pile on, but I think what both Dr. Sharif and both Sasha pointed out is the problem. That there was no plan to go in. There was no real actual plan to go in. They actually didn't understand the area that they were going into or what the problem was. They were playing off the whole idea, and this is why Pete Hegseth is completely unqualified and should never have been there. But his whole machismo thing, as if the U.S. was just so dominant it can run through everyone. Well, that's the same thing that Russia felt when it was going into Ukraine, and now Russia's still there in an endless war because they underestimated what the Ukrainian people were about. This is what this administration did when it started just taking, as you point out, the intelligence from Israel. Well, what happened to our intelligence agencies? This is where, again, the world has pointed out that the U.S. is following Israel in this path. And we cannot separate ourselves at this moment to say, well, it was Israel who actually took them out, because we are a part of that coalition. We are a part of that team that did that. So regardless of Israel being the official individual that pulled the trigger, we're still tied to that team. So we cannot separate that. On top of that, no one will be held accountable for what happened to the girls' school. And that's a very, very bad thing. And the reason the reason that I can say that confidently and sadly is because of the way this administration has tried to shift blame onto others. Donald Trump is regularly in interviews saying that we never realized, we never understood. And Sasha correctly pointed out, we knew Iran was going to close down the strait. We knew that. They've said that for decades. We knew that they were going to bomb different places. They've said that for decades. And for us to now say, hey, well, who knew? And then not even understanding that we keep pointing, and this is another thing that we have to stop because it's a big annoyance across the board. We keep talking about, oh, well, the strait only stops 20% of the world. It's the choke point, 20% of the world's energy, but we don't need that. Well, the fertilizer also comes through there, and our farmers are actually losing out on that. There's a lot of other things that affect us that come through there. And when we talk about the oil itself, oil prices are controlled by that. So regardless how much oil we produce in this country, the price of that oil is going to be governed by what's happening there.
Let me come.
So
All right,
trying
it's not a filibuster. Okay,
It's not a thing.
It's not a filibuster.
I'm just trying to. I'll finish with this.
Well, let me
I understand
respond,
it's not a
okay?
filibuster,
I mean,
but I'm trying to
there's
correct.
no
the thing.
filibuster on this. Okay. Number
I
one.
get that. I'm getting to a question.
Number one. You're wrong that there was no plan. There have been war plans with regard to Iran.
There's no
for
plan.
many years across multiple administrations.
David.
You don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Number two.
David, you told me last week boots were not going to come on the ground because you heard. You told me that.
You don't know squat about whether or not there were war plans or not. Okay. Number two. There hasn't been adequate accountability for years. What about and I'm for accountability. I'm in the business of accountability. What about the accountability for the withdrawal from Afghanistan? Where was the accountability for that? All right. Thirdly, okay.
There was accountability.
No, there was.
There was accountability. You keep
Nobody
saying
was
these-
fired. Nobody was fired. Nobody was fired. Okay. Nobody was prosecuted. Nobody. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question, Honorable David Walker, because these discussions has three parts. One is economics, another one is debt, and another one is war. War part, I think we discuss a lot. The economic and debt part, I just want to share. As USA has all of the talented people, like from North America, even in this show, world best resources, best intellectual, best economist, you attend in this show. Why don't USA make a proper economic plan as they have financial challenge and burden? They utilize their intellectual, they utilize their capacity, their universities, their research center, NASA, and all of the things, make a proper relationship with this global South, let's say the South Asia, and it's $1 trillion business. War actually not a solution in modern world. War is not a effective source of economic revolution as well. Better talent economy, utilizing talent, utilizing USA capacity. I am very impressed by US universities, Ivy League universities, research center, and everything. Why don't USA utilize their intellectual capability, their knowledge, their expertise for economic revolutions?
All right.
Why?
Several things. One, I want to agree with Jatovi on something. Okay, and that is that there are two issues with regard to energy. We, the United States, don't need oil and natural gas from the Middle East ourselves. However, as Jatovi properly pointed out, energy prices are global markets. And therefore, even if we don't need any of that energy, we end up having to pay a lot more for energy, which is what we're seeing right now. I was in California, about a week ago, and they're well over $5 a gallon already. But that's a different issue because actually California imports energy, even though the country as a whole doesn't need to. California does. Plus, California has a lot tougher environmental standards or whatever else, and so as they're in a different situation. To answer your question, I have advocated for years that the United States needs a comprehensive strategic plan that focuses on what are we trying to accomplish economically, national security, foreign relations, domestically, based on outcome-based terms. I still continue to push for that. Let me tell you what the problem is. Politicians say that they're for transparency and accountability. They're not. They don't want transparency. They don't want accountability. And one of the reasons that they don't want a plan that's transparent is because they will be held accountable for the results. And typically what ends up happening is without a plan saying this is what we're trying to accomplish, this is how we're going to measure success. If it doesn't work, what do? They throw more money at it, okay? And to me, one of the things that we have to recognize that unlike the end of World War II, where we were 50% of global GDP, now we're about half that. And so, yes, we're the major superpower, but not the only superpower. We need to partner for progress around the world on a number of areas, because a lot of the challenges that we have don't have geopolitical boundaries. That includes the environmental challenge, et cetera, and the energy challenge. Okay. They don't have geopolitical boundaries. So we need to work on a global basis to try to solve those problems.
So, David, I've got a question for you. So, Hegseth and Trump haven't been overly clear in expressing the war objectives. And can you talk about Hegseth never rose higher than a major? And, war planning usually belongs to 3-4-star generals. And, by the time, there are 20,000 majors in the U.S. military. There are only a couple hundred generals at that level. So there's a huge weeding out of 99% of everybody. And the ones who make it to the general level go to war college to learn war planning. So are we suffering from Hegseth's lack of training? First,
I would have not have voted for Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense if I was in the Senate. All right. Two, of the people who make general rank, 1-star brigadier generals, okay, of the 1-stars, 50% make major general, which is 2 stars, 15% make lieutenant general, which is 3 stars, and 5% make full general, which is 4 stars. Okay. There's a huge difference between those ranks. Okay. And the war planning is generally done by the military. Okay. It's generally done by the military, obviously with input from the civilians, but basically they're the ones driving that train, if you will. Go ahead.
Sasha had his hand up earlier.
I wanted to mention is actually it's a very sad situation, because regardless of the end of this war, Iranian-US-Israeli war, Iranians are probably the most vindictive and fanatical people ever been in this world. And when they will start, anytime it may happen even before the end of the war, but most likely after the end of the war, they will start their terrorist attacks around the world, including Europe and US and Asia, just all over the world, try to make their point. And it doesn't really depend on the result of the war. So this is going to be another situation where American leadership will say, how could we know that they will do terrorist attack? But we didn't know about that. How you mitigate that incredibly intolerable situation with people around the world, Americans included?
Well, Sasha, that issue is already being talked about right now very prominently. And it's one of the primary reasons why the administration is putting more pressure on Congress to pass funding for the Department of Homeland Security, because we know that the risk is greater with regard to Homeland Security now, in large part because of the Iranian conflict right now. No question.
David, I just have a question about.
Security will help to deter Iranians' attack. I really don't think so. Especially if most of the attacks will be in Europe against U.S. embassies around the world. I don't think Homeland Security has answers. And besides that, if they will concentrate on U.S.-based targets, Homeland Security is not going to help at all.
David, I just have a question about leadership and management. If you had 58,000 employees, David, and you were involved in an international conflict, would you take 2 weeks off and go on vacation?
No, I have been a longstanding advocate for something called no budget, no pay, and automatic continuing resolutions. Let me clarify what that means. That if Congress has not passed all of the appropriations bills by the beginning of the fiscal year, and for the federal government, it's October 1, then there is a continuing resolution where all the departments and agencies get funded at the prior year level, reversing out anything that was a 1-year investment. So you automatically get funded at the prior year level. Secondly, Congress must stay in session 7 days a week until they get the job done. Thirdly, they don't get paid. And fourthly, there's no retroactive pay. So no budget, no pay, automatic CRs. I can tell you that based on my experience going around the country and doing, citizen education, engagement, activations, that is the most popular thing among the American people. The most popular thing is no budget, no pay, automatic continuing resolutions. Now, there's something called the 27th Amendment to the Constitution, which says you can't adjust congressional pay in the current session. It may have to be effective the next session. Fine, no problem. That's a small price to pay, but it needs to happen.
Hey, David, just getting away from the war just for a quick second and everything along those lines, but it's been a very great discussion. I know that you've been wanting cuts in a variety of areas, and I did see that they are asking for a 20% cut from the National Institute of Health. And I was just wondering your thoughts on that, because that seems like that's an agency that needs funding, but they're going to have a drastic cut to their budget in the billions of dollars range and everything like that. So I was just wondering if that's one of those areas that you feel needs cutting, or is that too deep of a cut in your mind?
Well, my question is, where'd they come up with 20%? Right. That is a huge cut. Okay. I come back to what I said before. What are we trying to accomplish? How do we measure success? And how are they doing on that basis? Okay. These arbitrary cuts, just like DOGE. Okay. DOGE didn't do what needs to be done, and they didn't go about it the right way. Okay. We need a much more comprehensive and integrated review of the federal government. It's grown too big. It's promised too much. It's subsidized too many. It's lost control of the budget. It's undercut states' rights. We need a much more fundamental review, if you will. And I've been advocating for that. And, and part of that includes what we talked about earlier in this session, and that is we need a plan with outcome-based indicators. And that's how we ought to be making decisions. About when we create programs, when we create tax policies, when we fund them, when we oversee them, when we reauthorize them, you need to have metrics to be able to understand how are you doing, are you getting better or worse, and how you compare to others. And if you don't have that, you're making arbitrary decisions.
Yeah.
I think everybody's worn out.
Yeah, I think the Iranian conflict has worn everybody out.
I'm very frustrated by it.
There's one more metric that I think we do need to be aware of. At least this was pointed out by someone in the show. 20% of our GDP comes from 7 companies, and 20% of our GDP is going to healthcare. So are we running on a false economy? David, what's your thoughts on this?
Yes.
Well, we need more diversification. Okay, we spend too much on healthcare. There's no question about it. We've overpromised on healthcare. We spend much more than any other country on healthcare, and we get below average outcomes, below average life expectancy, below average or above average infant mortality, above average medical error rates as compared to other major industrialized nations. That's unacceptable. We probably the area we need the biggest reforms is healthcare. You may or may not know, Nick, but I get all the easy things like how do we put our finances in order. The other thing is I was co-chairman of the Institute of Medicine's get ready, guys, End of Life Committee.
No, well.
So I was co-chairman of that for the Institute of Medicine, along with a guy by the name of Dr. Phil Pizzo, who's head of the Stanford, medical school. And so, we had to go through and talk about, well, what are some of the things and why? because, believe it or not, we spend a huge amount of our healthcare costs on end-of-life issues.
Yeah. And also in the earlier part of the program, you discussed the unfunded liabilities of 88 trillion. Where did you find the 88 trillion? Everybody talks about
There we go. There we go.
Where did this come from?
The financial statements are something that very few human beings will ever read, okay? Because they're very voluminous. And if you look at the footnotes, keep in mind as a CPA, the footnotes are an integral part of the financial statements, but most people never look at the footnotes. There is a separate statement of social insurance. You can look at the statement of social insurance, and there are footnotes that back up that statement of social insurance. The total unfunded obligations for Social Security and all three of the Medicare programs, $80 billion. Okay, and it went up 10.1 trillion between 2024 and 2025, the end of the fiscal year.
David, I'd like to ask you one thing.
Go ahead.
There is of $39 trillion debt.
Yeah.
9 trillions will have to be refinanced later this year. Who are going to buy this debt of country with growing foreign debt, the war, the never-ending war, and all the social and many other problems? Is it going to be the Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and others? I don't think so, because America cannot defend them. They invest into Trump personally and United States close to trillions of dollars, and they have zero return on that. They cannot be defended. So why do you think they will continue buying US debt? Probably not. Is China, Japan are going? No. So give me the case of who is going to purchase.
Well, when you have a balance of payments problem, you have to do something. In other words, we're running a deficit. They're running a surplus. They got to do something with regard to the surplus. Historically, they've been buying Treasury securities. However, their appetite has been reduced, so they're not buying as much Treasury securities. And the biggest risk that we have is of a debt crisis would be a failed debt auction, meaning that we need to finance a lot more debt than people are willing to buy, and therefore we end up having to pay a lot higher interest rates. That's what I'm concerned about. Let me just leave you with this. Go to nolabels.org. Nolabels.org. There's a publication on there called Nightmare on Main Street. It paints a very vivid picture of what things might look like if we have a debt crisis in the United States. It's not a pretty picture. The primary author of it, is one on the staff, the strategic planning person, top of strategic planning for No Labels. I helped as well with regard to the publication. Take a look at that. We don't ever want to see that here or any place else. And by the way, if the United States ever has a debt crisis, it's a global depression.
And that's certainly something we don't want to see or even hear about, a failed debt auction. That would be horrible. But we are out of time, so I want to thank the Honorable David M. Walker, former Comptroller General of the United States and a contributing author to Fortune magazine. So now when I get back to the States, I'll have to go get the Fortune magazine articles, and we'll see you next week on economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. Take care.